What could be described as a big test case against paid parity in South Africa, businessman Andile Ngcaba is taking on IT giant DIDATA. He's accusing the company of racial discrimination, failure to pay his bonuses and paying him less than his white counterparts when he was employed there. Now, Ngcaba is claiming compensation to the tune of about 441 million rand in the first case of its kind. He's arguing that during the 12 years that he worked for DIDATA, white executives who reported to him were paid large bonuses while he simply wasn't. DIDATA argues that it doesn't owe Ngcaba anything as he was the beneficiary of a BEE scheme. The case will be heard in the High Court in Johannesburg come Tuesday. For more on this, let's bring in Andile Ngcaba's spokesperson, Yolande Tabo. Yolande, thanks very much for your time and welcome to the AM report. So, Mr. Ngcaba joined DIDATA back in April 2004. At which stage did he realize that there was some kind of pay disparity?
That's right. Mr. Ngcaba joined DIDATA as the executive chairman from 2004 until he left in 2017. He discovered this racial discriminatory practice in 2016 when there was an amendment in the Companies Act that required companies to disclose remuneration for executives.
And we also know that he's suing, my understanding, the cumulative amount is about 271 million rand. Are you able to break down that figure for us? Because there are various issues that he brings up.
So, because that is part of the case that is starting tomorrow, I can't go into details of the actual payment itself, but I can confirm that the amounts that have been filed in the court papers have been calculated by experts.
Okay, part of that amount, though, would have to factor in something like racial discrimination. I imagine that figure is something that's taken into consideration. It's quite an elusive thing to try and conceptualize. How did you go about deciding how much the company should pay for something like racism?
So I think in this case, you have to bear in mind that you had senior white managers that were participants in a DD Senior Management Trust, which was part of the BEE scheme. In addition to being participants to the BEE scheme, these managers were paid bonuses during this time. However, in the case of Mr. Ngcaba, DIDATA and Mr. Jeremy Ord are saying that even though Mr. Ngcaba participated in the BEE scheme, he shouldn't be paid a bonus.
Okay.
That is not, it doesn't sound fair to me, and I don't know what you think.
Yeah, and Shem, my perception is neither here nor there. But what I'm trying to understand more accurately is how do you factor in, look, making up for the pay disparity, how much he should be paid versus how much he was paid because of how much his white counterparts were getting makes sense. It's easy to try and understand how one would get to a figure. But when it comes to quantifying how much compensation he should receive for something like racism, I'm still a bit in the dark about how you went to put that figure together, mostly because there are some reports that he's actually suing about 10 million rand for racial discrimination. If that figure is accurate, how did you come to it?
The basis of the calculation was based on comparators. So what were these white executives paid during the same time versus what was Mr. Ngcaba paid during the same time? And comparing those two, is it fair and is it just? And if there are discrepancies, what were the reasons for such discrepancies? Because to us, having done to the experts having done the calculation, it seems that the only basis for the disparity is that Mr. Ngcaba was, as a black man, participating in the BEE scheme versus the white managers who also participated in the same scheme.
So you
but were receiving bonuses.
Right. So you can confirm that the 10 million rand is specifically just for racial discrimination. That figure is accurate.
Sure. Yes, it is.
All right. There's my understanding that the case has actually been to the CCMA before and it was thrown out. On what basis are you hoping for a different outcome?
The case that was put before the CCMA is a completely different case to what's going to the High Court tomorrow. And that the CCMA case was thrown out because of the timelines. The case that we're presenting to the High Court is completely different.
All right. What relation, if any, is there between these two cases?
There's none. Okay. There is no relation.
That's interesting. I've also seen moments where essentially we're told that Mr. Ngcaba has been quoted as saying that this is about also pushing back against racism in corporate South Africa. How far are you willing to take this? I mean, a victory in this particular matter would certainly send a strong message. But take me through the framework that is being considered insofar as this case is concerned. Is it more than just dimension data, or are we looking at something way bigger here?
Well, in this specific case, we are looking at the case in dimension data, which will prove that there is the systematic racial discrimination that is apparent in corporate South Africa. And
outside the pay disparity, Yolanda, give me the reasons why Mr. Ngcaba feels that specifically there's racism at the company. I mean, were there other moments that sort of alluded to this idea that he's being treated differently specifically because he's black outside of this pay disparity?
So up until Mr. Ngcaba, as I said earlier, discovered this racial discriminatory practice, it was unbeknown to him. So he did not know that this was going on. And given his status as Dimension Data, so when he joined Dimension Data in 2004, the company had revenues of about 3 billion, which he grew to 13 billion in around 2016. In addition to that, he grew the presence of Dimension Data outside South Africa to about 15 countries throughout East Africa, North Africa, West Africa, and the Middle East. And under his stewardship, Dimension DDMEA was the best performing region for the group. And it baffles us why he wouldn't have then been paid fairly to reflect that. When everyone else was benefiting from bonuses during that period from his hard work.
Right. Yolanda, just out of interest, I mean, many people will be wondering how he knew his white counterparts were being paid more. Are you able to let us in on how he got a hold of that information?
So he literally, like I said, the companies had to disclose executive remuneration, and that's when he saw that he was not being paid fairly, and that white managers that were reporting to him were being paid more than he was. Right. As a senior, as the most senior executive at DDMEA, as the executive chairman.
Right, we'll see how the case pans out. Thanks for your time, for getting us in on the information that you can. Yolande Tabo is Andile Ngcaba's spokesperson, and Andile is taking Dimension Data to court because of a pay disparity. He says he's being paid less than his white counterparts, specifically because he's black. Yolande, thanks very much for your time.